Which model for the more rural and water and sanitation districts, what kind of model works best for them? Why do the operators need the certifications? Why are they coming to you?
There's a variety of training sources out there. Water Environment Federation, of course, that's the big umbrella organization, but big national ground level.
In Reg 31, like going to come out, or is it getting updated, is what you're saying? Or that
That's the current standard, but the way
Yeah, you mentioned that these operators can work at any facility. All right, and that we've got another episode here of Engineers for Communities. Got a really fantastic guest, Sidney with the Indigo Water Group. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in a brief summary, what kind of is your expertise in the problem you solve?
My expertise is wastewater treatment, specifically biological treatment, and I do a lot of operator training classes all around the country. I also have online training classes. So that's the bulk of what I do now. I used to do other types of engineering work related to wastewater, but it's mostly training these days. I also am the primary author of the Fundamentals books, which is Water Environment Federation's sort of flagship operator training manuals. So I wrote all of book one by myself, and I kind of ran out of steam about halfway through book two and got some friends and colleagues to help me finish that one and participated in making graphics and one chapter in book three.
So, why do the operators need the certifications? Why are they coming to you?
There's a variety of training sources out there. Water Environment Federation, of course, that's the big umbrella organization. But big national agencies have a difficult time providing cost effective training kind of at the boots on the ground level. So, state agencies also provide some training, and there are local associations that provide some training. But the bottom line is there's just a lot of training need out there. So, there's a lot of operators who have to get either continuing education hours or professional development hours or training units every year in order to keep their certifications. So, to become an operator, it's a combination of book education, so they're studying, but they also have to have boots on the ground, frontline experience working in treatment plants. And the combination of those two things makes them eligible to take certification exams. But then once they're certified, they pass an exam and they're certified, then they have to keep up with their continuing education, much like engineers and lawyers and other professionals.
And is there continuing education? I'm assuming it's specific to operator training. It's not like they can't go just get PDHs and I don't know, grocery bagging.
They can't. Different states vary. So Colorado just made a decision where operators can no longer use safety training to meet their continuing education requirements. So we want them to have stuff that is directly related to process what they do every day. And it to give them a better understanding of how their facilities work and how other facilities work. Because once you're certified as an operator, you can work at any plant or potentially be the chief plant operator at any facility, not just your own.
Yeah, you mentioned that these operators can work at any facility in that state that they're licensed in. Do you see a lot of operators working at, I don't know, 5 or more facilities at any given time?
Sometimes. So there are municipalities generally employ their own workforce. So that would be like you or I just going to work every day and working at the same plant. I don't know if that's, I feel like that's the majority of operators. That's how it works. But a lot of smaller systems can't afford to have a full time operator on site all the time, right? Like there's a lot of systems, like a trailer park has a well, its own private water system. But because they're providing water to more than 25 hookups or 25 entities, they have to have a certified operator. It doesn't require a full-time person. So there are contract operators that sometimes have dozens of systems where they're just kind of making the loop and going to visit all these small systems once a week or twice a week, kind of depends on how much sampling or maintenance it requires. So there's kind of a blend of things going on.
Yeah, actually, I can think of a couple trailer parks that are exactly like that. And what's kind of funny is they're the one I'm talking to, they're working on going away from the well. They just want to tap into the system. adjacent because the regulations and the operators, all those costs are so much more expensive than just tapping into a bigger network.
Yes. And another challenge that we're starting to face, and not just water and wastewater industry, but everybody, is that the boomers are all retiring and there aren't enough people coming up through the ranks to fill all of those openings. So for example, I have to have my car worked on and it's going to be in the shop for 2.5 weeks. Not because it's going to take 2.5 weeks to do the repair, but because they don't have enough people to do the work. So it's in line to get the work done. And we're seeing that in water and wastewater industry too. So as more people retire, these contract operators are ending up with more and more little systems to take care of. And frankly, I don't know how they keep up with it because I do contract operations from time to time. And two systems is about all I can keep track of, in addition to the other work that I do. That's a lot. It's a lot of driving, a lot of sampling, a lot of paperwork to kind of keep up on all that.
Wow. Yeah. So that's kind of how I wonder how some of these guys do it that you say have dozens and then they've got all tons of point of contacts too. And then just dozens of, like you're saying, sampling paperwork that they're having to fill out every single time. And it's kind of
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Sometimes they'll have like the official chief plant operator on paper will have three or four people working under him that don't have the same level of certification that they do. Different states certify differently. Colorado does D, C, B, and A. So A is the highest. When you're the chief plant operator in a plant, your certification type has to match or be higher than what the facility is rated for. But the chief plant operator doesn't have to be on site every day. They can delegate work down below. So if I'm an A operator, I have A industrial and A municipal wastewater. If I was working as the ORC for a plant, I could operator and responsible charge. I could have people under me visit those plants. So on paper, I would have dozens of plants. But in practice, I might actually only visit those plants occasionally because I have people working under me kind of doing that, even though they're not certified at the same level.
Which model for the more rural and water and sanitation districts, what kind of model works best for them? Um,
Oh, that's hard. That's tough. So I have very strong opinions about this, which is I don't know that contract operations is always the way to go. Sometimes systems like contract operators because it can appear to be less expensive because they're only paying somebody to be on site for certain hours or so much time out of every week. But as a result of that model, a lot of times there is maintenance and upgrades and things that get deferred for much longer than they should, and then things start to fall apart over the longer term, right? You can't delay maintenance or delay upgrades forever.
so to summarize, you're kind of saying that because they don't have that eye like every day they're watching, like keeping up and like forcing, kind of being that forcing function to keep things moving. They're kind of like, I try to just check my box every week, be compliant with the state, and then move on.
Yeah. Well, and if you're visiting a dozen systems in a week, you may not notice that something is rusting through, or you might not notice that your chemical tank is borderline getting a leak on one side, right? Or that a gasket is failing, or that a pump is making a funny noise because you got to go and make it through those. But I feel like that's some systems don't really require that much maintenance, and the majority of operators I feel pretty safe in saying the majority of operators work for municipalities. They're not doing contract ops. So contract ops is one piece of the business, but the majority of operators are working full time for a city or a municipality.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So if I give you a example, if you're like a really rural, maybe you serve about 200 and you've got this wastewater plant that's got an MBR in it.
Okay.
I think that's class B, I think is where you're getting with the license. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that kinda like a tipping point in your mind, like, between the contract operator and a full-time, or
It's always so facilities are rated in two ways. They're rated by how much flow they treat, and they're rated by the complexity of the processes that they have on site, right? So it's kind of a twofold thing. So you could have a larger system that only needs a C or a D level operator, like a lagoon treatment plant that treats a lot of flow. Or you could have a really small system. Like I'm thinking of one city in particular, they have a population of about 380, but they have an activated sludge plant. And so they're required to have a B level operator, just like this scenario that you described. A more complicated system is going to require somebody to be looking at it every day. You can't rely on the SCADA system, that stands for supervisory control and data acquisition. That's kind of the computer that keeps track of everything that's going on in the facility. You can't rely on it to know that the pump is making a funny noise or that the basin is foaming over, right? You have to have a person who is there physically taking care of that thing.
yeah, like, kinda like the tank that's about to leak. The SCADA doesn't say, "Oh, the wall's corroded and has minimal thickness left in it."
Right. And there is a push to like automate more stuff in our industry and make it less reliant on having a physical person be there. But there's a lot of stuff that you just can't do with electronics.
Yeah, I mean, like, the whining pump. Like, if the pump's just sitting there whining and there's, like, a bearing that's loose, like, yes, it's getting the flow going, but it's, like, an inch away from just blowing up on you.
Right. And when it blows up, you'll get an alarm. It'll call you then, but then it's reactive instead of proactive.
And that's why having those maintenance schedules and stuff and keeping a constant eye, like, going around checking the equipment on a regular basis is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, I think of running a wastewater plant as kind of dribbling a ball down the soccer field, right? You just got to kind of nudge it. And as long as you do that, you will make steady progress toward your process control goal. But if you just give the ball a good whack down the field, might make it, maybe not.
It'll end up in a wider range of places. You have less
Yeah,
control.
yeah. So the plants, when you visit a wastewater plant, and I visit a lot of them, it's pretty easy to tell.
So you visit lots of wastewater plants and you can tell the difference between
So sometimes they're the same person. In fact, often it's the same person. So there are around 840 wastewater plants in Colorado, give or take. Only 44 of them are larger than 2.5 million gallons a day. So that's perspective, right? So for all of those smaller systems, 2 MGD and smaller, the guy who is the chief plant operator or woman is also the person who is writing reports and talking to the board, is also the person that's trying to get grant money and is the main interface with the state agencies. So, yeah, it's that person, whoever that is, has to communicate effectively with their board. Now, in a bigger plant, you have kind of that information funneling up, and then it's the chief plant operator who's communicating with the utility director, and the utility director has to make that case to the board. But that's a small percentage of systems, and we tend to gear everything that we do towards the large systems, the Denver metros and the DC water and wastewater authorities of the world, instead of focusing on the majority, which are these little tiny systems.
well, they've got the biggest tax base and the most, every like manufacturers, engineers can profit the most just helping them because they've just got so much, there's just so much more going on. And they're typically a lot more financially stable than
Yeah, it's not
the
just
other.
profit though. It's when you have a bigger utility, you get people who volunteer. So, like if you went to Water Environment Federation and you look at who's sitting on communities, it's engineers from larger engineering firms for the most part, and it's people from bigger utilities because they have the time and the expertise to do that. The guys at the small systems and women are running around. It's sample day, which means I got to get all my maintenance done before 10 a.m. and then I got to collect samples and I got to get to the lab or I got to run my own samples, right? Like they're busy. They don't have time for that. And so they kind of fade into the background when we're writing manuals or coming up with training or even preparing certification exams about what operators should know on a daily basis.
That's yeah, I agree. That's a great note. So what got like two more questions. What are some upcoming challenges or changes kind of in maybe at a EPA level and then a Colorado level in terms of the regulations with water and wastewater? Like,
Um, so everybody is super concerned about PFAS, which is, see if I get this right, polyfluoroalkylated substances, PFAS. PFAS is, we call these the forever chemicals, and these are showing up in people's bloodstreams, in the water supply, in natural environments. There are things like fire retardants and Teflon, and turns out that stuff is very good for your body. And we're just starting to get a grip on that. And we don't really have good answers yet for how we're going to treat that stuff or if we should treat it or how low we should treat it. So that's a big thing that everybody's talking about right now is PFAS. In Colorado and other western states, we have temperature limits coming for people's effluent. Essentially, EPA and the state are concerned that if really warm wastewater effluent gets put into a really cold stream in the winter, that it is going to shock fish, that they don't deal with that very well. So we've been doing a lot of monitoring for a bunch of years about the temperature of the upstream and downstream river and the temperature of people's effluents. And we're going to start seeing temperature limits in what you can discharge because the wastewater in Colorado tends to run between about 22 degrees Celsius in the summer, which is pretty warm. It's like 74 degrees Fahrenheit, and 10 degrees Celsius, or often not even that cold, 12 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter. But the river is going to be maybe half a degree Celsius. So that's a big temperature difference between those two things. Problem is, like, how are you going to cool down millions of gallons of water every day? There is no good answer to that question. You think about Denver Metro, 220 million gallons of wastewater every day going into the creek. They basically become the river. And there are smaller plants where they are the river when they discharge. So I don't know how we're going to deal with that as an industry, but we keep pretending we're going to. And then the last thing has been in the works for some time. So we have two regulations in Colorado that govern nutrient discharges from wastewater plants. One is Reg 85, and Reg 85 basically says that wastewater plants can't discharge more than 15 milligrams per liter of total inorganic nitrogen, which is ammonia plus nitrite plus nitrate, or 1 milligram per liter of phosphorus as P. So that's what Reg 85 says. And that's a technological based standard. Those limits were set where they are because we know that it is possible for most treatment plants to meet those limits without having to go into like extraordinary treatment methods. But lurking in the background is Regulation 31, and Reg 31 has water quality based limits that are designed to protect the aquatic environment and to protect fish and to protect downstream uses like drinking water supply. The limits in Reg 31 are much, much lower. They're 0.17 milligrams per liter for phosphorus and 2.1 milligrams per liter total nitrogen leaving a treatment plant. Phosphorus we can meet. That's just an issue of adding chemical. And so I feel like those limits will get adopted everywhere. But the nitrogen limit is not technologically possible unless we start building reverse osmosis units on the back ends of wastewater treatment plants. And that creates a whole new set of problems. So I don't know what we're going to do about that either. Like, on the one hand, it's wonderful that we want to have no impact on the environment. On the other hand, you can't have 8 billion of anything on the planet and have zero impact.
And is Reg 31 like going to come out, or is it getting updated is what you're saying, or that's the current standard?
That's the current standard, but the way that the water quality based standards work is that for it to show up in somebody's discharge permit, it first has to get adopted into the basin regulation. So we have, and I will get this wrong. We have a bunch of different river basins, like the South Platte River Basin is one. That's regulation 38. So before somebody could get a total nitrogen limit in their permit, there would have to be a hearing, and then the Reg 31 limit would get adopted into Reg 38, and then permit you writers could put it in people's discharge permits. And we've been kicking that can down the road for a number of years now because there isn't a reasonable technology that can achieve it, but it's still sitting out there. And so people in the regulated community are kind of anxious about where things are going in the future. And how do we handle that? How do we plan for it? What are we going to do?
Okay.
So, total nitrogen is organic nitrogen plus ammonia plus nitrite plus nitrate, all of those things. And we can get ammonia, nitrate, and nitrite to basically zero. We can get those really, really low. But every treatment plant has somewhere, and we don't really know for sure because we haven't monitored this well over the years, somewhere between 1.5 to 3 milligrams per liter of soluble, inert, which means you can't break it down biologically, organic nitrogen in their final effluent. And how much you have depends on kind of what's going on in the service area. But that material, it's not treatable, it's not settlable. We can't precipitate it. It just passes through the treatment plant. And so there's like, we can't touch it unless we get really crazy and start building RO units. And that's not going to happen. We have to get new people. And we're starting to address that. So I don't know if you know, but Littleton Public Schools and Denver Public Schools have both implemented a vocational track for water and wastewater operator. So high school juniors and seniors will be able to go through these classes, and at the end, they'll be eligible to sit for their certification exam. And historically, you couldn't take your certification exam until after you graduated, but these programs have been working with the state of Colorado certification board and they've made an exception. So these kids will be able to take their exams before they graduate and become certified operators.
Wow. So if someone's trying to come find some of your training resources, get information from you, where's the best spot for someone to find you?
I am easy to find. They can find me at indigowatergroup.com for the online classes, or they can email me at Sydney, which is SIDNEY at indigowatergroup.com, or they can call me 303-489-9226. I am a one person company, which you'd never know from looking at my website and all the stuff I managed to get done. So if you call me, you will always get me. There's nobody else here.
All right. Very, very amazing. All right. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your experience and knowledge with everyone.
Thank you. I hope that works out for you. It's been really fun.
Yeah. Thank you. It was.